It's time for America Outdoors Radio, the show that covers the outdoor scene across the U.S. of A. and the entire continent. Fishing, hunting, conservation, outdoor recreation, and great destinations, we cover it all every week. It's your country, your outdoors. Let's explore it together with your host, John Cruz.
Welcome to the show. It's the middle of October, and it may well be the best time of year if you like to hunt and fish. That's because cast and blast opportunities in mild weather are absolutely abundant right now. You can go duck hunting in the morning and bass fishing in the afternoon, or maybe deer hunting, followed by a trip for walleye. Upland birds, perhaps? Okay, you can always chase chukar along the breaks of the Snake River around Idaho, Washington, and Oregon, and follow that up with some salmon or steelhead fishing. Don't forget that trout rod either. That's a great tool to have after a morning grouse hunt. The thing about these cast and blast options is that this is usually the 1 month when you can do one or all of these great combo trips. The weather, like I said, it's usually nice. The trees and foliage are beautiful as they turn from green to scarlet and gold, and you usually don't have to freeze your buns off camping either. Yep, autumn days spent hunting and fishing, followed by a good meal and time around a campfire and time with the dogs, friends, and maybe some reminiscing and storytelling over a beverage or two. That's October, and that's the joy of a cast and blast trip this time of year. I'm going to be doing that very thing myself here this month in Eastern Washington when I go duck hunting in the morning on Potholes Reservoir with guide Shelby Ross, and after a tasty brunch of duck kebabs in the blind, get into his boat for a few hours of quality walleye fishing with my best friend and my son. I'm already salivating at the thought of the shooting, the catching, and, oh yes, those absolutely delicious duck kebabs in the blind. This week on the show, we've got a bit of a combo broadcast going for you too, covering bass fishing, duck hunting, and deer hunting too. We'll start things off in just a minute, talking about a new bass fishing tournament circuit that has some very big names associated with it. One of those names is Mike Iaconelli, one of the most well-known and colorful bass anglers in the entire world. Mike not only is fishing a new tournament series in 2019, but he's also got a brand new television show on the National Geographic channel, also called Nat Geo, and the name of his show is Fish My City. That's right, this Jersey bass angler is going to share the joys and challenges of urban fishing with a huge new audience, and his first show is airing this weekend. We'll talk more to Mike about this new project in just a few minutes. From bass, we'll transition to bucks, and whitetail bucks in particular. Will Brantley is the hunting editor for Field and Stream, and he's going to share some of the 50 or so tips you'll find in this month's edition of this venerable magazine that will help you harvest a buck this fall during the prime time of the season to do so. It's all about hunting the rut and having success when you do it. After we talk to Will, we've got some outdoors news for you about a new state record fish, about hunting restrictions and lawsuits in another state, and an open sign going up for the Roadkill Cafe in yet another one of our United States in this land we call America. On top of that, we've got some great advice about duck decoys and how to set them up to attract more action, courtesy of David Hart, who wrote a great article about this for Ducks Unlimited. Like I said, we've got a whole bunch of casting and blasting going on for you this week. So let's kick it off. Let's get it going by introducing you to a new powerhouse of a bass tournament series coming to a television screen near you. Our first conversation today is going to be with Bailey McBride. She's with Major League Fishing, and this is truly the new player when it comes to the bass fishing tournament circuits in a big way. Bailey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bailey, you've got a new Bass Pro Tour that's coming up. It's featuring 80 anglers, very well-known ones, too. What's this tournament circuit all about? And why don't you tell our listeners who some of these big-name anglers are?
Sure. So the Bass Pro Tour, we just announced at the beginning of September. We're super excited that 80 of our pros, many of them who fish with us already, have decided to come over and fish with us full time. So we've added to our existing 4 cups and 1 world championship an additional 9 events. 8 of those are tour events. similar to what people will be used to from FLW or Bassmaster Tour events. So there'll be fan activation, payouts, all that sort of thing. And then a tour championship that would be similar to the Classic. So it's a really exciting, huge announcement. I mean, it's really shaken up the professional bass fishing world, and we're just excited for all the positive things that are going to happen in the industry because of the announcement.
So, Bailey, some of the names I saw include the man, Kevin Van Dam, Alton Jones, Ish Monroe, Mike Iaconelli. These, again, are some big names. Are they all leaving their current tournament circuits like Bassmaster to come over to Major League Fishing, or are they just fishing both?
So unfortunately, these schedules don't align this year to allow them to fish both. So they are all leaving Bassmaster or FLW to come over and fish with that. And, huge names from both tours have decided to fish the Bass Pro Tour next year. So we are just absolutely thrilled. We really feel like we have a field of 80 of the strongest anglers in the world. And so it's going to be so exciting to see some of the names that haven't fished against one another before, having like an Andy Morgan up against a Kevin Van Dam, because they've been separate with FLW and Bassmaster. And our league has been really the only place that those guys would kind of compete against one another in Major League Fishing. So now to have them all on the same tour is going to be really exciting. I mean, it's just 80 straight hammers, and I am so excited to see how these events go.
Bailey, this is really exciting. I've got to ask, how did you lure these bass pros away from these two very well-known tournament circuits? Are we talking about some huge cash payouts or what?
I think it's a couple things. I think first and foremost, the biggest thing is that anglers control our league. We're half owned by anglers, and the anglers are the ones who make all the decisions. We basically told them in all the meetings that we had to invite these anglers to fish with us, but as long as we could still get our television shows out on time and they weren't going to get us in legal trouble for any reason, they could vote to change anything they want about the league. So there is an increased payout. I'm not sure where Bassmaster has settled on their payouts because I know they were kind of making different offers. But at the time that we made our initial pitch, it was a little over double what their payout was that we were offering just from the league's contribution. And so that's a huge motivator, obviously. Tournament anglers want to go where the money is. But more importantly, like I said, I think the ability to control your own destiny and to have a seat at the table. Boyd Duckett, one of our co-founders, he likes to say that the anglers have a seat anywhere from the boardroom to the bathroom. And, I mean, that can be a little crude, but I think it's pretty funny, and it's a good example of how involved all of our anglers are at really every level of our business.
Well, I think it's also very interesting how much exposure these anglers are going to get, much more than before. I understand Major League Fishing airs on the Outdoor Channel, the World Fishing Network, CBS Sports Network, even the Discovery Channel, and on demand on My Outdoor TV. That is a lot of airtime for this tournament series, isn't it?
It is. So it's more than 850 hours of cable and broadcast time on air, and then more than 350 hours of live streaming that we're going to be doing on MajorLeagueFishing.com. So people who love to tune in, watch weigh-ins and things like that, they will still be able to get that same excitement from having live coverage every day of our tournaments and a live post-game show every day where the guys are going to get up, talk about how they caught them, and talk about their sponsors. And it's just a really exciting new kind of format for that live streaming side of things. So we're thrilled about the show. We feel like we've got a really strong show, and it performs really well. It's the number one show on Outdoor Channel for the past couple of years in both Q1 and Q2 when our shows premiere, and then our re-airs also do very well. So we're just really excited to have so much more programming across so many networks.
Well, Bailey, we've got to go, but before we do, 2 questions. When and where is the first tournament, and when and where is the championship?
We do not fully have the schedule all worked out, so people will have to just keep an eye on MajorLeagueFishing.com and our social media channels, because just as soon as we have things finalized, we are pushing that news out as quickly as we can. But I can tell you that the first event is going to take place in the last week of January. So just a few short months away, and people are going to be able to experience the Bass Pro Tour.
All right. Well, the website to go to, folks, is MajorLeagueFishing.com. That's MajorLeagueFishing.com for this brand new Bass Pro Tour featuring 80 of the best bass anglers that are out there. Looks like it's going to be really exciting to follow this in 2019. Bailey, thanks for sharing this with us today on America Outdoors Radio.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Trolling for big salmon? Then tie on a spoon or spinner from McCombie's Custom Lures. These high-quality, made-in-the-USA lures help you catch more Chinook and coho. Whether you troll an Elite Series spoon, a Champion Glow spoon with a squid skirt, or a 3.5 Mini Colorado spinner, you'll be increasing your chances for a fish on. Look for McCombie's Custom Lures at Sportsman's Warehouse and other quality sporting goods stores on the West Coast and Alaska, or online at McCombie'sCustomLures.com.
I'd like to welcome a new sponsor to our show. It's Sportsman's Cove Lodge, and many anglers who have been there will tell you it really is Alaska's best lodge. Sportsman's Cove Lodge sits on a salmon highway full of kings and silvers. There's halibut too, and there are some really big ones. Finally, with decades of experience taking care of customers, Sportsman's Cove Lodge knows how to treat you right from start to finish. Ready to book your trip of a lifetime? Then call Sportsman's Cove Lodge at 800-962-7889. That's 800-962-7889. 800-962-7889 for Sportsman's Cove Lodge.
There's a place where the fishing is year-round, where the sun shines 300 days a year. The wineries and breweries are right downtown. The hiking and cycling offer spectacular views you just don't get in the big cities. Fortunately, the place is real and vibrant. It's the Dalles, Oregon, just 90 short minutes from Portland, along the gorgeous Columbia River, where the adventures are limited only by your imagination. Find out more at explorethedalles.com.
Backcountry Hunters and Anglers seeks to ensure North America's outdoor heritage of hunting and fishing through education and work on behalf of public lands and waters. Lend your voice to the fight today by visiting backcountryhunters.org or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Welcome back to America Outdoors Radio. I'm John Cruz. If you are a deer hunter, you have got to be excited about hunting the rut. And there is an article you've got to read in the current edition of Field and Stream. It's about the best 50 hunting tips for the 2018 whitetail rut. With us here to tell you more about some of these tips is Will Brantley, the hunting editor for Field and Stream magazine. Will, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it.
Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about this annual feature, Hunting Tips for the Whitetail Rut?
Sure. Well, Scott Bestel is our whitetails editor, and gosh, you'd be hard-pressed to find many guys who are better at getting around and killing big deer than Scott. He's up in Minnesota, and he's pulled this feature package together for us every year for kind of our flagship fall issue. This year it's our October-November issue, and he's always done the best days of the rut and packaged it with a lot of really good hunting tips. And that's what we have this year, our 50 tips, really kind of geared toward all the little sub-phases of the rut. And as always, Scott has brought his own advice to the table and interviewed a lot of experts and just come away with a really cool package that has some great information and just a lot of fun to read.
Well, one thing that jumps out at me right off the bat with this article is that there's 7 days laid out, 7 must-hunt rut dates. And, I live in the Pacific Northwest. You live in Western Kentucky. It's hard to believe that you and I should be out in the field on 7 specific days. How does he come up with this?
Well, there are a lot of ways that we come up with it, and there is some science to it. For example, we have looked at peak rut timing in various parts of the country, and biologists do that by backdating, fawn fetuses before they're born, backdating the fawn drop when they're born in the spring, and for the most part across the country, especially in the Midwest, kind of the heartland of the country, your rut timing is going to be right there around the middle of November. There's definitely some variation in the southeast and even in the Pacific Northwest up where you are. But Scott really kind of looks at those peak conception dates for fawns, and then he will kind of combine that with his knowledge as a hunter, the input that he's received from outfitters and guides and experts over the years on the best phases of the rut. And there's kind of a misconception among a lot of deer hunters that the peak of the rut is the best time to be in the woods, the time that's the most action-packed. And A lot of times that's not really the case. The actual peak of the rut, the peak breeding, is when you're going to have big bucks sort of locked down with does. They might vanish in a thicket for a couple of days. You actually may not see many deer from the stand. Really, some of the best times to be in the woods are during the late days of the pre-rut when your bucks are out. They're looking for those first estrus does and laying down a lot of sign. They're responding to calls. And then those first few days when the first few does begin to pop, they're really, doing a lot of chasing. You're seeing bucks running does out in fields and at all hours of the day. And those tend to be some of the days that Scott always picks as the best. And then he'll consider things like the moon phase for a given time of the season, and then also things like whether firearm seasons are open. Is one of these really hot days going to be on a weekend, on a Saturday when a lot of guys are going to be able to get out in the woods and hunt? And all of those things kind of go into Scott's decision making when he's picking these 7 best days.
You're listening to America Outdoors Radio. We're talking to Will Brantley, the hunting editor of Field & Stream magazine, about some great hunting tips for the 2018 whitetail rut. It's an article that's in the magazine right now. Now, we just talked about days you've got to be out there. Let's talk about moon phase. You touched on that briefly. I've heard people say that when there's a full moon out, you may as well stay home because those deer are moving at night. They're not going to be moving during the day. What say you?
Well, to me, personally, I think it depends on the time of the season. There have been a lot of studies done on the way that the moon phase affects deer movement, and some studies have suggested that it doesn't have any effect at all. And I don't believe that. I mean, the moon phase has an effect on the tides and all sorts of wildlife. And from my experience, earlier in the season, a big bright full moon coupled with warm weather, for example, when you're in this part of the season, for example, early October, the deer aren't really putting a lot of effort into the rut yet. A full moon can seem to make things tough, but later in the year, during the rut, when the weather starts getting cooler, I think a lot of hunters would tell you that a full moon might stifle some of the early morning activity. It might stifle some of the late evening activity, but you might get a flurry of deer up on their feet at midday. It seems to get a splurge of midday movement, so to speak. So your mid-morning hunts during the early parts of the rut combined with a full moon can be pretty productive at times.
The author of this article actually contacted quite a few experts around the country. One of them is somebody I respect quite a bit, Mark Kaiser out of Wyoming, and his big tip for hunting during the rut is to not just, rattle some antlers, but to actually stage a battle. Tell our listeners more about that.
Sure. Well, if you've ever heard 2 big mature bucks fight, there's a lot more noise going on than just than just 2 antlers clicking together. They're out of breath for one, so there's a lot of heavy breathing, wheezing, things like that. Deer will also snort, wheeze. They'll grunt at one another as they're posturing. And then once they actually start fighting, man, they're breaking limbs, they're kicking leaves back, and a lot of that stuff can't be, you can't really replicate that even from a tree. So if it's during the rut, you have a gun in your hand and you're able to get on the ground and make some of that noise, in the right situation, of course, it can be pretty effective. And some of the best luck that I've personally had calling deer has been from the ground and replicating a fight like that, stomping my boots on the ground, rubbing saplings, grunting, snort wheezing, things like that. And it doesn't work every time, but when it does, it's usually an experience you don't forget.
All right, we've got time for one more tip for hunting the whitetail rut this year. What will you suggest?
My favorite whitetail tip is probably kind of a boring one compared to getting on the ground and calling, but it's something that has helped me a ton over the years, and it's something that is a very simple tip that I learned years ago from Bill Jordan, of course, with Real Tree Camouflage, and his saying during the rut was just food does buck. If you find a good food source, really regardless of the time of year, deer are slaves to their stomach, and during the rut, if you're watching a food source and you're consistently seeing does, let's say you give it 3 sits and you're like, man, I haven't seen anything but does. I need to move. Well, that's precisely the wrong time to move. If you're seeing does actively moving on a food source during the daylight and it is during the breeding season, that is the best sign of all that you probably need to stay put. And because the bucks will come find those does. One of those does will come into season, and you're going to be sitting in the place that you need to be when it happens. So that would be my favorite rut tip, which one I use every year, and it's one that just virtually always works.
Well, that's a very good tip indeed. And folks, you can find a lot more of them by buying the latest edition of Field and Stream magazine. And inside the October-November edition, you'll find the best 50 hunting tips for the 2018 whitetail rut. And this is also available online too at fieldandstream.com, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
All right, so there you go. 2 places to get it. Either go to your local store and pick up the magazine, or go online to fieldandstream.com and look for the best 50 hunting tips for the 2018 whitetail rut. Will, thanks for sharing this with us today on America Outdoors Radio.
Thank you, John.
Why book at Sportsman's Cove Lodge?
Why is Alaska like no other place on Earth? It hasn't changed in thousands of years.
From the way you get here on a float plane to the way you go out with the guides and the boats, it's just a professional experience.
And I said, this is as good as it gets. I said, if you can't catch fish here, you can't catch fish anywhere.
Your experience with us will leave you speechless.
Book now at alaskasbestlodge.com.
Trolling for big salmon? Then tie on a spoon or spinner from McCombie's Custom Lures. These high-quality, made-in-the-USA lures help you catch more Chinook and coho. Whether you troll an Elite Series spoon, a Champion Glow spoon with a squid skirt, or a 3.5 Mini Colorado spinner, you'll be increasing your chances for a fish on. Look for McCombie's Custom Lures at Sportsman's Warehouse and other quality sporting goods stores on the West Coast and Alaska, or online at McCombie'sCustomLures.com.
You're back with America Outdoors Radio, and I tell you what, I don't often recommend watching TV, but Friday nights for the next few weeks, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, you better be tuning in to Nat Geo Wild. That's because Mike Iaconelli, that very famous bass fisherman from New Jersey, has got a brand new show that's going to be airing called Fish My City, and Mike is with us now. Mike, great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Mike, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about this new 6-part show that you've got going on here?
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Real excited about this new program. It's on Nat Geo Wild. It's called Fish My City, and the premise of the show, really, to me, is amazing because it's going to let a lot of people in to a big secret, and that secret is you don't have to go to exotic locales in the middle of nowhere to catch amazing fish. You can do it right where you live. We're going to cities all over the U.S., all over the world, and we're discovering the fishing opportunities within the city limits. It's so amazing to me. It's really something that's come full circle. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as a kid fishing on the banks of the Delaware River and the Schuylkill. And, so city fishing it's in my blood. It's who I am. And, now to be able to share it with people, to go to these places I've never been in the city and go after completely different species while I'm there, it's an unbelievable thing, and I'm excited about it.
What are the cities you're going to be fishing at during this show season?
Yep, the initial run here, which is 6 original cities, we're going to, in the United States, we're going to be fishing New York City, Miami, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Austin, Texas. And then you're also going to see 2 international episodes, which are London, England, and Taipei, Taiwan. So you're really going to get a pretty diverse cut of cities around the world and all the species that live and thrive, within the city limits.
Now, this brings up a point. You've made your living as a professional bass fisherman for years, but given some of the cities you're visiting, you're not going to be bass fishing for some of them, aren't you?
I tell you, 90% of them I'm not bass fishing, and it's one of the real. It was one of the real highlights for me. Get to do types of fishing, methods, baits, to fish for species that I'd never fished for before in my life. You know, I can tell you from a personal standpoint, it has revived my love for the sport. You know, I honestly got to be the student in a lot of these cities and learn from locals on, you know, how to do it, the baits to use, the method to catch them. What was nice is fishing to a certain extent.
Sure.
And I was able to use some of my knowledge from bass fishing and bring it into the world. But you're going to see a discovery process in every city. And I hope the audience feels it like I did, but it was new and unique, and it was like a puzzle every city I went to. And the goal was to solve the puzzle. And, you know, we called it our bucket list. And the mission was to catch 3 different species in each city. And it was, you know, I'll be honest, it was a fail if we didn't catch all 3. And you're going to see that happen. You're going to see the good, the bad. You're going to see it all unfold right on the show.
Here's another question for you. The local talent. Now, again, I'm guessing you don't have a whole lot of sources in London or in Taipei. Is the producer basically going through the yellow pages and scrolling down for fishing guides? Or how did you find the local experts that you fished with?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Nat Geo Wild, for sure, has an amazing research team. Between the sources that I had, and like you said, most of my sources are here in the U.S., they pulled one of the greatest technologies we have as anglers now, which is social media. And, you know, social media is an amazing tool to be able to network and explore and meet people from all over the world. And I can say they did a fantastic job of locating some of the very best city anglers from across the globe. And you're going to see that come through loud and clear on the show. You're going to see that they're the best for that species. They're the best for that city. And most of the time, they're pretty amazing characters. And that's definitely another highlight of this show.
You're listening to America Outdoors Radio. We're talking to Mike Iaconelli. He's the star of Fish My City, which premiered Friday, October 12th on Nat Geo Wild, and you can watch it for 5 more weeks every Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Nat Geo Wild. He is fishing cities here in America and throughout the world for 3 different species of fish in each city. So is this just a fishing show, or do we get some local flavor in terms of, you know, the city itself? Maybe are you cooking some of the fish too?
It's definitely not just a hardcore fishing show. So, you know, one of the great things about the show is an hour show. So we had a bigger box to work in to be able to highlight the city. And, you know, at the end of the day, this is Nat Geo, and Nat Geo and Nat Geo Wild are about the animal. So you're going to see a lot about the particular fish, about the species, how it lives, the biology of it. You're going to see a lot about the environment, and you're going to see this theme of how amazing nature and water and the waterways are, even in cities. You're going to get a little history. You're going to get a little culture. You're going to get some of the travel in these cities, and we use a lot of public transportation to traverse fishing locations within the city. And of course, you're going to get the characters and the excitement of the process. So it's got something for everybody. I can tell you, if you've got listeners right now that know people that aren't hardcore anglers, I'd invite them to watch the show. I think they're going to have a fun journey and have a fun time.
You know, it is amazing to me how nature thrives despite what we as humans throw at it in terms of destroying habitat and pollution and all that. You know, you've been fishing cities, like you said, for a long time. You did it as a kid. You actually had another show a few years back called City Limits Fishing. Are things getting better in our waterways in American cities, or do you think they're just kind of the same or maybe even worse?
No, you hit the nail on the head with the first statement. They are getting better, and I can tell you that it's a common theme, especially in the United States. A little slower process internationally, but it's a common theme that, I think the city, the people that live and thrive in the city, they realize what they have, and years of neglect, especially you talk about from the Industrial Revolution up until the late 60s and early 70s. the waterways were sort of, they weren't treasured, right? They were dumped in, they were forgot about. But, when you saw the Clean Water Acts of the late 60s and early 70s enact, you really saw this slow, gradual process of the waterways cleaning. I can tell you in my lifetime, from fishing on the Delaware and the Schuylkill River in Philadelphia in the mid to late 70s when I started, to now, it's a totally amazing success story to where the water's cleaner, the natural vegetation has grown back. You see hawks and bald eagles in the middle of the city. And, of course, the fish species, Delaware River in the section around Philadelphia, gone over 50 different fish species thriving right in the city limits. That's testament to what's happened. And again, it's happening here in the States for sure. And internationally, a little slower to come to the table, but they're also really conscious now of cleaning up their waterways.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, you are giving me hope. I'm really excited to see some of the cities you're visiting. I hope there is a season 2. A mutual acquaintance of ours, Brad Hole, who is a kayak fisherman out here in the Seattle area, I know he's trying to get you to come to Portland, Oregon to go fishing for sturgeon. And if you go there, you got to go to Voodoo Donuts and try some of the craziest donuts you'll ever eat in your life.
I don't want to give too much away, but pretty good chance season 2 we'll end up in Portland.
That makes me happy. We have got to go. But again, folks, the name of the show is Fish My City. You can catch it on Nat Geo Wild every Friday for the next few weeks at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. The star, Mike Iaconelli, that very well-known bass fisherman from New Jersey. Let him take you fishing throughout the U.S., all over the world, to some very, very crowded places where the fishing is surprisingly good. Mike, thanks for telling us about this today on America Outdoors Radio.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Mark Hemstreet, owner of Shiloh Inns. Shiloh is proud to be celebrating over 40 years of providing you, our valued Shiloh customers, with Shiloh's sincere friendliness, efficient customer service, and clean, comfortable, attractive, non-smoking rooms and suites, all at an affordable price. Shiloh also offers many free amenities like free Wi-Fi and free continental breakfast or hot, full, delicious breakfast at most Shiloh Inns, as well as pools, spas, steam, sauna rooms, exercise fitness facilities, and business centers. And even the kids stay free. And for you dog lovers, Shiloh is very dog friendly. So ask your best friend where he or she wants to stay. Next time you're traveling for business or pleasure, we think you'll get a pause up for Shiloh Inns. For reservations, call 1-800-222-2244 or visit our website at shilohins.com. Shiloh Inns, affordable excellence. American family owned and proud of it.
There's a place where the fishing is year-round, where the sun shines 300 days a year. The wineries and breweries are right downtown. The hiking and cycling offer spectacular views you just don't get in the big cities. Fortunately, the place is real and vibrant. It's the Dalles, Oregon, just 90 short minutes from Portland, along the gorgeous Columbia River, where the adventures are limited only by your imagination. Find out more at explorethedalles.com.
I'd like to welcome a new sponsor to our show. It's Sportsman's Cove Lodge, and many anglers who have been there will tell you it really is Alaska's best lodge. Sportsman's Cove Lodge sits on a salmon highway full of kings and silvers. There's halibut too, and there are some really big ones. Finally, with decades of experience taking care of customers, Sportsman's Cove Lodge knows how to treat you right from start to finish. Ready to book your trip of a lifetime? Then call Sportsman's Cove Lodge at 800-962-7889. That's 800-962-7889. 800-962-7889 for Sportsman's Cove Lodge.
Looking to reel in the marketing opportunity of a lifetime? Then set the hook, because we've got it right here. America Outdoors Radio has sponsorships available, and we offer an affordable platform to reach thousands of listeners interested in fishing, hunting, and the outdoors. Find out more by contacting host John Cruz through his website at AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com. That's AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com. But hurry, if you wait too long, this big opportunity might just get away. That's AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com.
Trolling for big salmon? Then tie on a spoon or spinner from McCombie's Custom Lures. These high-quality, made-in-the-USA lures help you catch more Chinook and coho. Whether you troll an Elite Series spoon, a Champion Glow spoon with a squid skirt, or a 3.5 Mini Colorado spinner, you'll be increasing your chances for a fish on. Look for McCombie's Custom Lures at Sportsman's Warehouse and other quality sporting goods stores on the West Coast and Alaska, or online at McCombie'sCustomLures.com.
Welcome back to America Outdoors Radio. I'm John Cruz. It's time for some outdoors news, and we're going to start it off with a story about a new state record fish from the Outdoor Daily News. We share an Arkansas fishing mark that had held for nearly 33 years finally fell 2 weeks ago when a Kansas angler making an annual trek with friends to the White River pulled in a cutthroat trout weighing 10 pounds and 2 ounces. The angler in question is Mike Bowers of Abilene, who said he's fished these waters for longer than the record had held. Bowers makes 2 or 3 trips to Arkansas's northern trout streams every year, and he caught this record trout on a number 15 bait hook with salmon eggs, which just goes to show you don't have to fish fancy to catch really big fish. Congratulations, Mike. Our next story isn't quite a feel-good story. From the National Shooting Sports Foundation and the Sportsman's Alliance, we learned that bear hunt restrictions are definitely impacting hunter numbers in New Jersey. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy's pledge to end black bear hunting in the Garden State is definitely having its intended effect even before the season opened. Governor Murphy, as you may recall, issued an executive order cutting off all state land for bear hunting, and now only 3,000 of the state's 11,000 bear hunting permits have been sold. That's in comparison to nearly 8,800 permits that were sold last year, with 5,500 of those going by the end of September. Governor Murphy couldn't end the hunts outright, but he is limiting the ability of hunters to go afield by keeping them off state lands for bear. In response, the Sportsman's Alliance, Safari Club International, and the New Jersey Outdoor Alliance have announced they are taking New Jersey's governor to court. They have filed a lawsuit claiming that the governor violated New Jersey law by banning black bear hunting on state-managed lands without scientific or policy justification, but instead of fulfillment of a campaign promise. They also say that the state violated federal law by diverting the use of state-managed lands away from the uses mandated by funding laws and their agreement with the federal government. Finally, they're saying the state violated other laws and requirements in banning black bear hunting on state-managed lands, including the fact they failed to take public comment or consider any scientific evidence. Here's hoping that the voice of sportsmen and science are heard over the political pandering of an anti-hunter who occupies the governor's office in New Jersey. Finally, it looks like the Roadkill Cafe is poised to open January 1st, statewide in the Beaver State. That's the word from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, which, pending approval by their Fish and Wildlife Commission, will allow the salvage of roadkill deer and elk. Now, this is meant for accidentally struck animals. You don't get to target them with your car or truck, but should you hit one or somebody you know hits one, you can salvage the animal. And once you do, you just have to complete a free online permit within 24 hours. There's no trophy hunting allowed either. The antlers and head of all salvaged animals must be turned in to an ODFW office within 5 business days, and you need to clean up your mess too at the side of the road, including the gut pile. Having said all that, it's nice to know that the meat from these animals will not go to waste. Bon appetit, my friends. Eat hearty. Next on America Outdoors Radio, it's time to talk duck hunting. And one important thing, if you're going duck hunting, is your decoys. What does your spread look like? What's it made up of? One person who's got some great tips about improving your decoy spread is David Hart. He's coming at us from the great state of Virginia today, and he just wrote a great article about this topic that appears in the latest Ducks Unlimited newsletter. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, David, let's talk a little bit about duck decoys. I think the first question that everybody wonders about, and I've seen this pendulum swing big time over the years, is how many decoys does a hunter need to be successful?
Well, guess that depends. And you probably hate that answer, but that's kind of the way it is with duck hunting. With numbers, really, you need to kind of look at what's going on around you. What are the real birds doing? If you're out and about and you're seeing big flocks of birds sitting on rice fields or, a marsh, you need to go with big flocks. If you're hunting a smaller pond or something like that and you're just seeing, small groups of a dozen or 6 or 8 birds at a time, go with small groups. It's really just kind of a matter of duplicating what you see in the real world.
And that's probably a great answer, because I know back in the early 80s when I was buying my first decoys as a young man, it was the more the merrier. And now I hunt a small pond on opening day, and I don't put out more than a dozen decoys. But you're exactly right, because I never expect to see more than a dozen birds at any given time in a pond like that. Let's talk about diversifying the spread, too. I'm guilty of this. All dozen of my decoys are mallard decoys, but we should probably be putting some other species in our decoys, too, shouldn't we?
It can help. It really, again, it depends on what's going on around you. I live in Virginia, as you mentioned, and where I hunt, it's mostly mallards, wood ducks, and gadwalls. So it really wouldn't make any sense for me to put out pintail or shoveler decoys or something like that. So you really kind of want to just match what's going on. And if you're in good duck country where you have a real good diversity of species, get several different species of decoys. But you want to generally keep them together by species. When you look at real birds in the wild, they tend to kind of self-segregate by species. And they will mingle a little bit, but, you want to kind of keep your pintails together and your mallards together and your shovelers together, that kind of thing.
Something that goes along with this in terms of the different species are different types of decoys. And you really laid it out well in the article that you wrote, using the example of goose decoys, about how you don't want to have a whole flock of, basically sentry decoys that looks like they're all nervous as heck.
Yeah, you want to, again, mimic what's going on in the real world. And if you look at a flock of geese at ease, if you see them even like on a city park or something like that, some are loafing, maybe sleeping, some are feeding, and there's always a couple with their head up looking around, looking for danger. So, again, just mimic what you see in the real world and just diversify your spread that way.
Something else I think a lot of people forget is leaving a landing zone. I have seen this. I've walked out and seen ponds, seen fields where there's dozens, if not hundreds of decoys, but there's nowhere for the birds to land. And I remember this vividly from an old TV show and video that Grits Gresham put on back in the 70s about you got to leave a hole of death. I mean, it really is important to leave a landing zone, isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely important. They have to land somewhere, especially if you have a lot of decoys out. And they're going to kind of circle around, circle and circle, and if they're going to land, they're going to land on the outside edge of your decoys, out of range. You don't want to do that, obviously. So you want to make a hole within shooting range, and you also want to consider the wind direction. The birds always land into the wind, so you want to put that hole, a basic horseshoe shape is fine. Just leave kind of a U shape or a horseshoe shape open out in front of your blind and maybe a little upwind of the blind. So when the birds circle to land in that landing zone, they're going to be right in front of you. They're going to be kind of coming down to land in that hole right in front of your blind. So the wind direction is as important as the hole itself, where you put that hole in relation to the wind direction.
One more thing I'd like to cover here, realism. Can you get by on a dozen decoys you buy at the big box store for less than $50? Or should you be investing in half a dozen quality flocked decoys?
The flock decoys I think they're worth the money. They absolutely are. A lot of it depends on how much hunting you do, how serious you are about it. But, if you're dealing with pressured birds and if you're dealing with a lot of other hunters around you, you need to have a better spread than everybody else. And flocked heads and even the fully flocked decoys will stand out. I mean, they'll attract birds when just a standard shell decoy or a standard, solid plastic decoy won't.
Well, folks, we are out of time. David, I could talk to you a lot more on this topic, and there's certainly a lot to cover. But if you, as a listener, want to find out more, head to ducks.org. That's the website for Ducks Unlimited, the leader in wetlands conservation. If you go to ducks.org, you're going to probably find a link to this great article that covers even more tips to improve your decoy spread, and you'll find out some information about a great organization, too. David, thanks for taking the time to tell us about this today on America Outdoors Radio.
Well, thanks for having me, John.
While you're on the web, checking out the Ducks Unlimited website at ducks.org, I hope you'll take a few minutes to check out another website. You'll find it at talkamericaradio.us. It's the new conservative voice for talk radio, and you can hear it online 24 hours a day. And we are thrilled that we are part of the talkamericaradio.us lineup every Saturday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Other places online where you can hear us include Stitcher and Podbean. Just look for us at America Outdoors Radio. And YouTube, our channel there is Northwestern Outdoors. That's one word. All three of these platforms let you hear our show on demand at your convenience, and you get to hear our sister show, our regional show, Northwestern Outdoors, too. It's about time for me to get back in the field, and I am truly enjoying the opening weekend of duck hunting season, especially since I get to do so with my kids. Last weekend, it was the quail opener with my son. The week before that, it was the youth opener with my daughter. And next week, it's that cast and blast combo featuring teal, mallard, and walleye. I do love October, and I hope that you get out there and enjoy it too. I also hope that you're blessed with good health and much happiness in the days ahead, along with time outside, hunting, fishing, and enjoying the beautiful changing colors of nature. Remember, it is your country and your outdoors, so get out there and enjoy it.